Lavender Village. The name itself conjured images of tranquility. Rolling hills painted purple with endless rows of lavender. The air thick with the intoxicating aroma of the blooms. A gentle breeze whispered through the fields. It was a picture of peace, a stark contrast to the bustling city life Emma left behind. The village was small, quaint cottages lined a single road. The windows, dark and empty, watched Emma like silent eyes. A shiver ran down her spine. She brushed it off, blaming the unsettling stillness. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. Emma clutched the worn, leather-bound journal in her hands. Her grandmother's journal. The same grandmother who had warned her never to step foot in Lavender Village.
I never understood my grandmother's aversion to the village. She would always change the subject whenever I asked about it, her eyes clouding over with a mix of fear and sadness. It was as if the very mention of Lavender Village brought back memories she wished to forget. My childhood was filled with fantastical stories about this place, tales of enchanted forests, hidden treasures, and mystical creatures that roamed the night. These stories painted Lavender Village as a place of wonder and magic, a place where dreams came to life. She would weave tales of magic and wonder, her voice soft and melodic, drawing us into a world of imagination. But there was always an underlying tension, a shadow that loomed over her words. But her voice always turned cold when she spoke of the lavender itself. The fields that surrounded the village, once described as beautiful and serene, now seemed to hold a darker secret, a secret she never fully revealed. After her passing, I received a letter. It was unexpected, a piece of her past reaching out to me from beyond the grave. A letter addressed in shaky, familiar handwriting. It was an invitation, a plea. The words were simple yet urgent, filled with a sense of desperation that I couldn't ignore. "Come to Lavender Village," it read, "before it's too late." The urgency in her words left me with a sense of unease, a feeling that something important was at stake.
Ignoring her parents' warnings, Emma decided to honor her grandmother's last wish. She felt a deep connection to her grandmother, a bond that transcended time and space. Emma decided to honor her grandmother's last wish. She couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was something she was meant to undertake, a path she was destined to follow. She packed her bags and embarked on a journey that would take her to the heart of the mystery that had haunted her family for generations, a journey to a place that felt both familiar and eerily unknown. The drive was long, the road winding through landscapes that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. The sun began to dip below the horizon as Emma reached the outskirts of the village. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the fields of lavender. A sign, weathered and worn, greeted her. It stood as a silent sentinel, marking the entrance to a place steeped in history and mystery. "Welcome to Lavender Village," it proclaimed in faded paint, "where peace blooms eternal." The words seemed to echo in the stillness, a promise or perhaps a warning. The words felt less like a welcome and more like a warning. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a story much larger than herself, a story that had been waiting for her all along. As Emma drove deeper into the village, the scent of lavender intensified. It was overpowering, suffocating. The air was thick with the fragrance, almost as if the very essence of the flowers was trying to seep into her soul. She had never experienced anything like it before. It was both enchanting and unsettling. She rolled down the windows of her car, hoping to catch a breath of fresh air. The silence was unnerving. No bird song, no rustling leaves. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The stillness was almost deafening, amplifying the sound of her own heartbeat. Just the low hum of her car engine and the distant drone of insects. The contrast between the mechanical hum and the natural buzz created an eerie symphony that played on her nerves. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the fields themselves were alive and aware of her presence. The lavender fields stretched out on either side of the road. They seemed endless, a sea of purple that went on forever. The uniformity of the rows was almost hypnotic, drawing her eyes into the distance, making her feel as though she was driving through a dream. Row after row of perfectly aligned plants. Something felt off. The precision was too perfect, too unnatural. It was as if the fields had been meticulously arranged by an unseen hand, each plant placed with deliberate intent. The lavender plants themselves seemed wrong. There was a subtle distortion in their appearance, a slight twist that made them look almost sinister, It was a small detail, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Their stalks were twisted and gnarled. They looked like they had been contorted by some unseen force, their natural beauty marred by an underlying malevolence. It was as if the plants were in pain, their twisted forms a silent cry for help. The blooms were a shade of purple so dark they were almost black. It was an unnatural color, one that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The darkness of the blooms added to the sense of unease that was growing within her. They swayed rhythmically in the windless air. The movement was slow and deliberate, almost as if the plants were dancing to a tune only they could hear. It was mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time, like they were beckoning her closer. The plants seemed to lean towards her, their dark blooms reaching out as if to touch her. It was an invitation and a warning, a call to come closer and a plea to stay away.
My hands tightened around the steering wheel. The leather felt cold and unyielding under my fingers, a stark contrast to the warmth of the day. I could feel the tension in my muscles, the instinctive urge to turn the car around and leave this place behind. My heart pounded in my chest. Each beat was a drum, echoing the fear that was building inside me. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, heightening my senses, making every sound, every movement seem amplified. A sense of dread settled over me. It was a heavy, oppressive feeling, like a dark cloud hanging over me. The sky seemed to darken, the landscape taking on a more sinister tone. It was as if the world around me was changing, becoming something darker and more dangerous. I had a sudden urge to turn the car around, to flee. Every instinct was screaming at me to leave, to get as far away from this place as possible. But something held me back, a strange compulsion to continue, to see what lay ahead. But something compelled me to continue. It was a pull, a magnetic force that drew me forward, despite the fear, despite the dread. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I had to keep going, to find out what was waiting for me in the heart of the lavender fields.
Her grandmother's house stood at the end of the road, a small stone cottage, almost swallowed by the encroaching lavender fields. Its windows were dark, like empty sockets staring out into the twilight. The air grew colder as Emma approached the house. She could feel her breath catching in her throat. The scent of lavender was overwhelming, cloying, like a physical presence.
With trembling hands, I fished the old iron key from my pocket. The metal was ice cold against my skin. The lock was rusted and stiff, but it finally gave way with a groan. The door creaked open, revealing a darkness that seemed to have a life of its own. A darkness that seemed to reach out and pull me inside.
The air inside the house was stale and heavy, as if it had been trapped for decades, untouched by the outside world. Thick with the scent of dust and decay, it clung to the walls and floors, creating an almost tangible presence. Cobwebs clung to every surface, weaving intricate patterns that told stories of long-forgotten times. Shadows danced in the dim light, filtering through the grimy windows, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own.
Emma took a hesitant step inside, her heart pounding in her chest as she crossed the threshold into the unknown. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the gloom, the darkness pressing in on her from all sides. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that seemed to swallow every sound, amplifying her every breath. The only sound was the beating of her own heart, a steady drum that echoed in her ears.
The living room was sparsely furnished. A faded floral couch, a dusty coffee table, and a cold fireplace stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time. The only sign of life was a single flickering light bulb that hung precariously from the ceiling, casting a weak, intermittent glow.
Her gaze fell upon a wall covered in photographs, each one a frozen moment in time. Dozens of them, all framed in matching silver, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light. They were portraits of people she didn't recognize. Men, women, children, all captured in moments of stillness. All staring out from the photos with vacant, haunted eyes, their expressions frozen in time, yet filled with an unsettling intensity.
Emma felt a chill crawl down her spine. Who were these people? What stories did they hold within their silent frames? And why did their eyes seem to follow her every move, as if they were watching, waiting for something? A floorboard creaked above her.
Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. Was she alone? Had she been followed? Grandmother?
She called out, her voice barely a whisper in the stillness. There was no answer, only the echo of her own voice bouncing off the walls.
Hello?
Then she heard it. A low murmur, a whisper barely audible coming from the hallway.
Emma, you should not have come here.
Emma spun around, her heart pounding in her chest, but the hallway was empty. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her, closing in. They spoke of secrets, of darkness, of the hunger that lay at the heart of Lavender Village. Panic surged through Emma. This place, these whispers, it was all too much. She had to get out. She stumbled back towards the front door, her hand reaching for the doorknob. But the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it had been nailed shut from the outside.
Let me out! Help me!
She screamed, pounding her fists against the unforgiving wood, but her cries were swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. The whispers continued, taunting her, mocking her fear. Emma sank to the floor, her back pressed against the cold wood of the door. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that no one could hear her. The shadows in the house seemed to deepen, closing in on her like suffocating hands. The air grew thick and heavy. The scent of lavender, once sweet and inviting, now reeked of decay and death. Emma was trapped. The faces in the photographs on the wall seemed to stare at her with a newfound intensity. Their eyes, once vacant, now flickered with a malevolent amusement.
No, no!
The whispers intensified, swirling around her, seeping into her mind. They told her that she was one of them now, that Lavender Village never let go of its victims. Emma closed her eyes, surrendering to the overwhelming sense of despair that threatened to consume her. There was no escape. Lavender Village had claimed her. The village remained, peaceful, serene. The lavender continued to bloom, its intoxicating scent carried on the wind to unsuspecting travelers. The house stood silent, another soul added to its collection. The whispers faded, for now, they would resurface. They always did, when the lavender called out once more, luring the lost and the curious to their doom. Lavender Village awaited.